We spend billions exploring distant galaxies, yet we know almost nothing about what lies directly beneath our feet. Every deep mine in human history has barely scratched the surface of our planet, leaving hidden the colossal pressure and unbearable heat of Earth's interior. A depth of several kilometers feels like our limit, yet it is merely a trivial step on the path toward the true heart of the Earth. Down there, in eternal darkness, forces operate that can turn solid granite into soft dough and make metals flow like water. We are about to plunge into an abyss where familiar sunlight ends and the territory of absolute darkness begins. Our descent starts in the very topmost layer of soil, which humans have always regarded as their only foundation. At a depth of just 30 centimeters, a hidden world teems with life whose scale we rarely stop to consider. Enormous numbers of insects and small creatures build their own complex systems of roads and dwellings here. Field mice and moles carve labyrinths for hunting and protection, while earthworms tirelessly loosen the earth, allowing plant roots to breathe. If we drop lower, roughly 2 meters beneath the surface, we reach the level where humanity has said farewell to its loved ones for centuries. Traditional burials are typically placed at this depth, and over time they become genuine time capsules for historians. Yet at the 4-meter mark, our first truly significant discovery awaits, one tied to the great rulers of the past. It was here, in 1922, that explorers uncovered the entrance to the tomb of Egyptian pharaoh Tutankhamun. Buried alongside his body in complete darkness lay thousands of objects made of pure gold, chariots, and furniture that had been preserved perfectly by the absence of oxygen and moisture. That discovery proved that dry earth can hold the physical memory of people far longer than any legend. At 7 meters, ordinary household devices no longer function, and professional metal detectors take over. With them, people uncover treasures buried during wartime and ancient weapons that sank deep into the ground under their own weight over hundreds of years. Once we cross the 7-meter boundary, nature gives way to military secrets and engineering ingenuity. This is where the famous Cu Chi tunnels are found, which became a symbol of hidden warfare in Vietnam. They formed an entire underground network stretching more than 150 kilometers, complete with hospitals, kitchens, and weapons depots. Soldiers lived for years in those narrow passages, remaining invisible to the enemy right beneath his feet. These structures were built by hand with primitive tools, yet their ventilation systems and booby traps continue to astonish engineers today. People have always sought shelter from outside threats deep in the earth, and that practice reached its peak in the mid-20th century. Secret government bunkers at depths of 10 to 20 meters were engineered to withstand direct hits from aerial bombs and support hundreds of people living in complete isolation. At these levels the soil becomes extremely dense, pressing against the walls of any structure with enormous force. Despite that, some animals manage to venture even further in their search for safety. The Nile crocodile holds the undisputed record among large creatures, capable of digging burrows up to 12 meters deep for hibernation or protection from drought. It is the deepest dwelling ever created by a living being without machinery. At such depths the soil temperature no longer depends on the weather above, holding at a steady cool temperature of around 50 degrees Fahrenheit. When we cross the 20-meter mark, we enter the grim world of the Paris Catacombs, which emerged as the solution to the most terrifying sanitary crisis in French history. In the late 15th century, city cemeteries were so overwhelmed that the situation became critical for residents of neighboring buildings and for the cleanliness of the water supply. The authorities made an unprecedented decision to repurpose old abandoned limestone quarries located 20 meters underground as a massive ossuary. Over many years, remains were transferred into these subterranean vaults. Today they hold the memory of millions of city dwellers whose names became part of the city's history. This space stretches across 300 kilometers, creating a mirror reflection of the city above, where living people walk the sidewalks without suspecting the existence of an entire kingdom of the dead right beneath their feet. At this depth the soil reliably absorbs every sound from the surface, leaving visitors in absolute silence. Yet humans learned to use these empty spaces not only for burials but also to sustain modern society. Descending to 60 meters, we enter a zone of innovative agriculture that depends neither on sunlight nor on the whims of weather. In China and several European countries, underground farms are actively developing at this level inside former bomb shelters and tunnels. Instead of sunlight, specialized LED lamps with specific wavelengths illuminate the crops. Plants receive their nutrients from water without the use of conventional soil. This method allows greens and vegetables to be grown year-round under perfectly clean conditions, free of harmful insects and toxic runoff. Deeper still, at 105 meters, sits the world's deepest subway station, known as Arsenalna, located in the city of Kiev. To descend to its platform, passengers must ride escalators for more than 5 minutes, covering an enormous distance down through layers of earth and granite rock. Building such facilities demands colossal engineering calculations, since the pressure of the ground at that depth can crush ordinary concrete structures like paper. At this level the air always carries a distinctive scent of ozone and metal, and contact with the outside world becomes extremely unreliable. Remarkably, even where humans are forced to construct massive reinforcements, nature finds a way to assert itself without any tools at all. At 120 meters in certain regions of Africa, the roots of wild fig trees can be found forcing their way through the tiniest cracks in stone. It is the absolute world record among all plants, as the tree spends decades sending its living threads deep into the abyss in search of a single sip of groundwater. The roots coil around rock formations and penetrate underground caves, displaying an astonishing will to survive in conditions of complete darkness and absent oxygen. Continuing further down, at 160 meters we encounter specialized zones for isolating spent nuclear fuel, where modern technology ensures the complete safety of the surrounding environment. The goal is to prevent radiation from escaping to the surface for thousands of years while the process of nuclear decay runs its course. The Earth in this role acts as a reliable shield, protecting humanity from its own dangerous inventions. At this depth there is no longer any sound of the subway or any trace of tree roots, and the temperature begins its slow but steady climb upward. At 155 meters in Sweden lies a unique site called the Sala Silver Mine, home to the world's deepest hotel room. It is a former silver mine where the air temperature never rises above 36 degrees Fahrenheit year-round, although the room itself is maintained at a comfortable 64 degrees. There is no cellular service or internet, and the only way to communicate with the staff above is by ordinary walkie-talkie. Descending further to 240 meters, we reach the bed of the world's deepest river, the Congo, whose underwater canyons plunge into the dark abyss of the African continent. Even powerful modern vessels cannot always accurately measure the bottom here because of fierce whirlpools and the enormous water pressure at such a depth. At this level, humans begin laying transportation arteries that connect entire regions. In Japan, for example, the Seikan Tunnel runs beneath the seabed, dropping 240 meters below sea level and allowing trains to cross the strait between the islands of Honshu and Hokkaido. Constructing such projects requires incredible effort, as engineers must constantly fight leaks of saltwater and the colossal weight of the ocean overhead. The true trials begin past the 1,000-meter mark, where the Earth becomes an extreme zone in which working conditions demand the highest level of protection and continuous air cooling. In India at a depth of 3,000 meters lie the old workings of the Kola gold fields, which inspired the creators of many films about treasure hunting. During active operations, miners spent entire shifts there under catastrophically low oxygen levels, extracting the precious metal from hard quartz veins. The absolute world record for depth of penetration, however, belongs to South Africa, where the Mponeng gold mine is located. Its tunnels descend 4,000 meters, a distance comparable to stacking 10 Empire State Buildings on top of one another. At this depth, a person comes face to face with natural heat radiating from the very center of the planet. The temperature of the rock reaches 150 degrees Fahrenheit, and without gigantic refrigeration systems humans could not work there at all. Massive ice cannons constantly pump cold air into the workface so that workers can be present for even a few hours. The pressure of the rock layers at this depth is so immense that the stone becomes unstable, demanding extraordinary caution from every miner. Working 4 kilometers down becomes a daily battle with physics and one's own endurance. The elevator ride from the surface to the lowest level takes more than an hour, and during that time people's ears pop repeatedly from the sharp changes in pressure. Even the most advanced equipment at these depths begins to fail, as lubricants thin out from the heat and metal becomes brittle. In these scorching tunnels, people find not only gold but also remarkable microorganisms that have lived in complete isolation from the outside world for millions of years. These creatures feed on chemical compounds in the rock and require neither sunlight nor oxygen. Humanity peered into this abyss only out of a thirst for profit, but even gold cannot carry us any further down. We have reached the boundary where conventional mines become impossible due to unbearable conditions. Yet human curiosity knows no limits, and where miners give up, scientists step in with their ultra-powerful drilling rigs. When we leave ordinary mines with their elevators and workers far behind, we enter a zone where the physical presence of a human being becomes impossible. To grasp the scale of the next step, it helps to recall the deepest point in the world's oceans, the Challenger Deep in the Mariana Trench. It plunges nearly 11 kilometers down. If we flipped the world's tallest mountain, Everest, upside down and sank it into that abyss, more than 2 kilometers of water would still remain above its peak. Yet even this colossal oceanic trench pales beside what humanity has managed to accomplish in solid rock. In the 1970s in the Soviet Union, on the Kola Peninsula, an ambitious project began to drill the deepest borehole in human history. Scientists were not searching for gold or oil. Their sole goal was simply to learn what our planet is actually made of at great distances from the surface. By 1989 the drill had reached the staggering depth of 12,262 meters. That narrow hole, just over 20 centimeters in diameter, became the deepest man-made point ever created. The drilling process at those depths turned into a technological nightmare, as familiar laws of physics began behaving differently. Below 12 kilometers, the temperature of the granite rock climbed to 356 degrees Fahrenheit, nearly twice what geologists had calculated in advance. The drill string, under its own weight, became plastic like a long strand of spaghetti, and controlling it from the surface was nearly impossible. Every extraction of the drill to replace a bit took several days, and the steel drill heads melted and wore down to dust against the abnormally viscous rock. A frightening legend still circulates in popular culture about strange sounds heard from the depths of the borehole, which many took to be something supernatural. In truth, no audio recordings ever existed, and the project was halted for purely technical and financial reasons. At such heat, the rock behaved not like solid stone but like thick tar, constantly closing the borehole walls the instant the drill had passed through. Scientists realized that with the technology available at the time, they had run into a wall erected by nature itself. Despite the halt, the Kola Superdeep Borehole delivered a wealth of discoveries that turned science upside down. At 7 kilometers, researchers unexpectedly found water and fossilized remains of ancient microorganisms that had lived there billions of years ago under monstrous pressure. It had previously been assumed that life and moisture at such depth simply could not exist. It also turned out that at great depth there is no clear transition from granite to basalt, as every geography textbook had shown. Earth's crust proved far more complex and uneven than the brightest minds of humanity had ever supposed. We managed to poke only a tiny hole in the upper layer of the planet, yet even that experience revealed how little we understand the inner workings of our own home. Beyond that 12-kilometer boundary begins a world where rock ceases to be rock in any sense we recognize. We stand on the foundation of an immense emptiness, behind which lie gigantic layers of superheated material in eternal motion. Once the 12-kilometer mark of the Kola borehole is left behind, we permanently leave the zone accessible to direct examination by instruments. Everything we know about what lies deeper comes from studying the vibrations of earthquakes that pierce the entire planet like X-rays. The first and thinnest layer, upon which we have built our cities and oceans, is called the Earth's crust. If you compare the Earth to an ordinary chicken egg, the crust is even thinner than the eggshell in proportion to the total volume. Beneath the continents it averages about 35 kilometers thick, while under the oceans it narrows to just 5 to 7 kilometers. It is the only rigid and brittle section of the planet, literally floating on the surface of the scorching interior. We are accustomed to thinking of the Earth as something immovable, yet the crust is broken into enormous plates that constantly collide and override one another, triggering catastrophic destruction at the surface. Immediately beneath this thin shell begins an entirely different world, where the rules of solid matter stop working in any familiar sense. From a depth of 70 to 2,900 kilometers stretches the mantle, which accounts for roughly 80% of the planet's entire volume. It is a gigantic ocean of superheated rock existing in a strange state between solid and thick liquid. Because of monstrous pressure and temperatures reaching 5,400 degrees Fahrenheit, the rock here behaves like soft clay or extremely dense tar. The mantle is in constant, very slow motion known as convection. Hot currents rise upward while cooled material sinks downward. This invisible displacement of colossal masses is what drives entire continents and powers every volcano on Earth. If the mantle were completely solid, our planet would be geologically dead, like the Moon. Yet this layer serves merely as a giant thermal buffer for an even more mysterious and dangerous region at the very center. Crossing the 2,900 kilometer mark, we enter the outer core, a true raging ocean of molten iron and nickel. This layer is about 2,200 kilometers thick, and temperatures here range from 7,000 to 9,000 degrees Fahrenheit, comparable to the surface of the Sun. The material is in a completely liquid state, constantly rotating because of the planet's axial movement. That rotation turns the Earth into a colossal electrical generator, producing a powerful magnetic field around our home. This invisible shield, born in the molten abyss, holds our atmosphere in place and protects all life from lethal solar radiation. Without this liquid metallic ocean beneath our feet, the Earth would be stripped bare within a matter of years. We are alive because deep inside the planet an enormous engine is constantly at work. But even this is not the final destination of our journey. Hidden at the very center of this liquid inferno is something that defies common sense and the physics we are used to seeing on the surface. Passing through the churning ocean of molten metal, we reach the final point of our journey at a depth of 5,150 kilometers. Here begins the inner core, a dense ball roughly 2,400 kilometers in diameter. The most astonishing fact is that at a temperature of 10,800 degrees Fahrenheit, which matches the heat at the surface of the Sun, this iron does not melt. It remains absolutely solid because of monstrous pressure that is 3.5 million times greater than atmospheric pressure at the surface. Imagine the weight of an entire fleet of heavy aircraft carriers pressing down on every square centimeter of that glowing metal. Under such conditions, iron atoms are packed so tightly that they simply cannot begin to move and turn into liquid. This gigantic crystal of iron and nickel is the most isolated and inaccessible place in the entire known universe. The inner core behaves in deeply unusual ways and presents scientists with one mystery after another. Research has shown that this iron ball rotates on its axis slightly faster than the rest of the planet, completing one extra rotation roughly every few hundred years. This phenomenon is called superrotation, and it proves that the heart of the Earth lives its own separate life. Moreover, at the boundary between the liquid outer and solid inner core, a constant process of crystallization is underway. The Earth is slowly cooling, and particles of molten metal are depositing layer by layer onto the solid core, causing it to grow by several millimeters every year. That process releases a colossal amount of energy, sustaining the planet's thermal balance and preventing it from freezing solid from within. Yet this coin has a flip side. Billions of years from now, when all the liquid core has turned to solid rock, the magnetic field will vanish and life on the surface will become impossible. We will never reach the center of the Earth not only because of unbearable heat but also because of the physical impossibility of building any device capable of withstanding such forces. At depths of several thousand kilometers, every metal known to humanity would either turn into a shapeless droplet or be crushed to dust by gravitational force. Even if we could find a way to cool a drill, the rock at those depths closes in instantly, leaving no chance of maintaining a shaft or borehole. The secrets of Earth's center are sealed forever beneath a thickness of 3,959 miles of rock and iron. There, at the very epicenter, gravity becomes zero, because the entire mass of the planet pulls you equally in all directions at once. It is a place of eternal silence and colossal power, governing the rotation of the planet, its climate, and the very possibility of our existence. Our journey into the depths has shown that beneath our feet hides a world whose scale and forces surpass any human imagination. Humanity lives on nothing more than a paper-thin shell of hardened rock, beneath which oceans of liquid metal churn and an iron core blazes. Our lives depend entirely on this natural reactor, which generates the magnetic shield protecting our atmosphere from cosmic radiation and which we could not exist without. We have barely grazed the surface of the planet, since the deepest borehole has not even covered 0.5% of the distance to its center. The Earth continues to guard its greatest secrets under crushing pressure, reminding us how little we truly know about our own home. If you want to be the first to learn about incredible facts and hidden processes that govern our planet, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next plunge into the mysteries of the universe.